Okay, welcome. This is the July program of the Ozaukee Washington Birding Coalition. For those of you who have not been to one of our presentations, either Zooming with us, and welcome to the Zoom crowd as well, or in person, we hold monthly meetings, and they are spread among the sponsoring organizations that have actual meeting sites. The coalition was spearheaded by the Noel J. Cutright Bird Club, which has its regular meetings at the River Edge Nature Center. The other partners include River Edge, the Mequon Nature Preserve, the Loch Lorone Conservancy in West Bend, and the Friends of the Cedarburg Bog. They're based at the bog on the WM Field Station. And most recently, we've added the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory to the coalition. And we'll have a program later in the year from its Modus Wildlife Protection Director, coordinator. I hope you'll, if you're not here, if you're not already on our email list, so if you didn't get an email about this program, I will have a sheet of paper on the back table where Jackie has her wonderful publications and all, and we ask you to leave me your email address, and I'll be glad to add you to our email address. You'll only get a couple of emails a month from us, but we do send out reminders about our meetings and field trips. So it is my pleasure tonight. Does anybody else have any questions or anything else to raise? I should introduce myself. I apologize. I'm Carl Schwartz. I'm the program coordinator for the Cutright Bird Club, which also provides the honorariums for the speakers for all of our programs. I'm very pleased to introduce tonight Dr. Jackie Augustine. She joined Audubon of Kansas in 2021 as its executive director, but she's originally from right here in Wisconsin, from Two Rivers, and many of us know her best because she received her master's degree at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Thank you. Jackie's standing right next to me now, so that, is that better? Can you hear me out there? Okay, well, I'll start over then.
Oh boy.
Jackie Augustine joined Audubon of Kansas in 2021 as its executive director, but she's originally from Two Rivers, and many of us know her best because she received her master's degree at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and while there was a member of the River Edge Bird Club and active with the bird banding work led by Al Shurko at the River Edge Nature Center. And we're pleased to have Al with us here tonight. For more than 20 years, she's been studying the mating behavior of greater, the prairie chickens we have here in Wisconsin, and lesser prairie chickens in Kansas, where I actually got to see a prairie chicken, a lesser prairie chicken. And she went on to earn her doctoral degree at Kansas State University as the executive director of AOK. Now, there is a great acronym for an organization. She works to support its threefold mission of advocacy, conservation, and education. She's also a bird watcher devoted to providing native plants around her home. And I think she'll probably have something more to say about that later. Jackie, take it away.
Great,
Thanks.
thank you. Like Carl said, it's great to be here. You know, growing up in Wisconsin, I just love coming back, and especially this time of year when it's 100 degrees in Kansas, and you think it's hot here. This is wonderful compared to Kansas. So it's great to be back. Like Carl said, I'm a bird watcher, and I really appreciated the mentorship provided by Al in helping me learn how to band birds and all different birds and different seasons, and the River Edge Bird Club that helped me and tolerated my question. I always ask, how did you know that? And I thought they were making stuff up half the time, but it was great being here, and it was a great learning experience. So I'm so honored to be back and presenting for all of you today. I'm going to be talking about this study that was published a few years ago that describes why 3 billion birds have disappeared. But like I said, I'm currently the executive director for Audubon of Kansas, so I want to plug these things before I forget. Um, so we have this magazine called Prairie Wings. The one with the landscape on the front is our current one. And so before you leave today, make sure you take this one at least. And then we have other magazines back issues. So if you like what you see in this one, take one of each in the back. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to see that magazine, it is online, available online at audubonofkansas.org. Just look for our little publications thing. I'm also going to pass this around. This helps me figure out how many people I talk to in a year, so my board stays happy. But there's also a place on there for emails. And so if you want to hear updates from Audubon of Kansas, we send out one email a year, or not a year, one email a month, just talking about Kansas issues but a lot of these issues are far-reaching. We work a lot in the wind and solar energy siting area, and actually we had something about Wisconsin a while back because of the prairie chicken and the solar facility that was going up next to the prairie chickens here in Kansas, or in Wisconsin. So I'm going to pass this around. Okay. So let's get started. What I'm going to do is I'm first going to talk about what we have lost. So I'm going to depress you off the get-go. So once you're thoroughly depressed, I'm going to talk about how we know that information's correct. And then I'm going to go on and talk about what's causing the decline. But then I'm going to end with a reason to hope. I don't want you leaving here depressed. So to give you a reason to hope, then I'm going to talk about what Audubon of Kansas is doing, and then what you can do to help the birds. So first, what we have lost. We have lost 3 billion birds. And this study looked at all of the regularly occurring birds in North America. So 529 species. Of course, there's many more that have been seen in North America, but we're talking about the ones that regularly spend their time here. So 529 species, and 303 of them declined, or about 57%. That's 2.9 billion birds gone since 1970. I'm sure, some of you have just started birding, but some of you have been birding a while. Raise your hand if you've seen changes in bird populations while you've been birding. Lots of hands going up. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, right? You've seen changes. And so, but this study put a number to it. And so it's a really remarkable study. That equates to about 1 in 4 birds. And we're talking about individual birds, we're not talking about species. So there's 25% fewer birds out there today than in 1970. And so what was also great about this study is it kind of parceled out, okay, well, what birds? Are there some species of birds that are more susceptible than others? And migratory birds in particular need our help. There's 419 out of 529 species are migratory. So most birds in North America are not migratory, about 80%. And we lost about 30% of those, so a third of our migratory species. So what that tells me is that our resident birds are doing okay. So if we have local habitat, our resident birds that are there year-round are able to find the resources we need. But it's those migratory birds, those birds that need habitat multiple places along their migratory route, and good quality habitat so they can fill up with fuel and keep on going. Those are the birds that are struggling. Next are aerial insectivores. There's been a lot of documentation about insects declining and the increased use of pesticides, and so it makes sense that our aerial insectivores, those birds that eat insects out of the air, are suffering. And this barn swallow, right? We think barn swallows are being kind of ubiquitous. You know, we see them a lot along our barns and under our eaves of our houses and things, but we have lost 2 in 5 barn swallows since 1970, so about 30% of our aerial insectivores. We've also lost forest birds. The wood thrush, I mean, everybody loves to hear a wood thrush in spring, right? We've lost 6 in 10 wood thrush since 1970. The overall decline is not too bad, about 17%, but that because there's so many woodland birds, that's a large number, 170 million woodland birds. And so this chart here is just showing all the different habitats, and you can see eastern forest birds, there's a decline, but you can see a decline in almost all the different bird species, or different birds in the different habitats. But the one that we've lost the most, and the one that made me the executive director of Audubon of Kansas, is our grassland birds. We've lost 53% of our grassland birds, so half of them since 1970. And as Carl was explaining, I started studying prairie chickens, and I just got so sick of watching prairie chickens disappear every year. You know, every year I would see a fewer birds. So I know this personally, the data shows that, and this bar at the bottom are our grassland birds. Our grassland birds have been hit the hardest of any habitat in North America. And like I said, the prairie chickens especially, we've lost so many, even in Kansas. We used to have wonderful populations of greater prairie chickens where I did my PhD research of, I know at least half the leks where I did my PhD research is gone. So in 20 years, we've lost, birds. And if we look at the eastern Kansas, the greater prairie chickens, it's supposed to be the best tall grass prairie habitat available. We've lost, at least 60% of our prairie chickens in eastern Kansas. Our grassland birds are in dire straits. But if we look again at the species or families that are involved, 90% of the loss is only from 10 or 12 families. 38 of 67 families decline. Those losing the most are the sparrows, warblers, and blackbirds. Each of these families have lost over 400 million birds each in each of these families. Of course, they are, sparrows and warblers are some of our more diverse families, so there's a lot of species, there's a lot of, individuals there, but the percentages range from 38% to 44%, but, they've lost a third, 3/5 of their size. This one I think is always funny. Some people are like, well, maybe this is a good thing. We've lost our old world sparrows, which in North America, that's two species, the house sparrow and the Eurasian tree sparrow. They're both introduced from Europe, and so they're not native to North America, but we've lost about 81% of our house sparrows. Our larks and finches, of course, these are a little bit less diverse group, but we've lost over 100 million in each of these groups. We've lost, in the larks, there's only one species in that group. So a decline in 67% of our lark family means horn larks have declined 67%. And I guess that one I think is rather concerning because they're generally associated with agricultural fields. So we're doing something to our agricultural fields that is not allowing those birds to survive. And then our finches decline in 37% of them. And then the rest of these are all declines in less than 100 million, but you can see a large range in percentages depending on, how common they were to begin with. And again, the one I want to point out here is the nightjars. Nightjars we've lost, what is it, 55%. That's one of our aerial insectivores, our nocturnal aerial insectivores. And so that's real concerning that even those birds that aren't common, we're losing them even more. So hopefully you're not all walking out. You want to know more. So how do we know about these declines? So again, they examined 529 species, and they got their data from hopefully things that you've participated in the past, or if not, I encourage you to participate in them. So one is the breeding bird survey. Raise your hand if you've participated in a breeding bird survey. There's a few in the crowd. This one's a little bit harder to get involved with because you have to be an expert in identifying birds by sound and sight. So these are where volunteers go out. It's a program run by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and you go out, and every half a mile you stop and you stand outside your car for 3 minutes and record every bird that you see or hear. And then you go another half mile, and you do that for 50 stops or 25 miles. And I've done a couple of these surveys, and they're really interesting because you get to go into areas and just listening from the road, it's amazing how much you can hear. So these are done in end of May, mostly June, and recording all the birds. So this is really great at getting breeding bird data. So it's great at getting data from birds that are on their breeding grounds in summer and that are singing. These are so mostly birds that breed in June and July. So the other one is the Christmas bird count. Raise your hand if you've participated in a Christmas bird count. Okay, a lot more there. And that is, if you've never participated in a Christmas bird count, it's great. Usually you go out with an expert and you're helpful even if you don't know anything, because you're counting every single bird that you see. So all you have to do is say, hey, there's a bird, and then the expert identifies it. So it's great. And these are great at getting our wintering birds. So our birds that are only in our area in winter. So, and I did want to mention that if I show this breeding bird survey map of Kansas, like a third of the routes are vacant and need people. I show this map of Wisconsin, and there's only one route that's vacant. It seems like the Beaver Dam route. So, little plug if you want to add the Beaver Dam route, they need it. But I mean, Wisconsin does a wonderful job at keeping these surveys going. And then, the Christmas bird counts, that's a 15-mile diameter circle where they count all the species and individuals of birds that they see in one day. And it's a great thing. And then there was one other set. So shorebirds, you generally don't survey on breeding bird surveys. So there's a special survey that's just for shorebirds that was included. So that gives us population trend data, right? Is the population increasing, decreasing, staying stable? But then we need population size data. How many birds are out there? And so those two surveys give us increasing, decreasing, stable, and then the population size says, okay, where is it? Is the population size up here, down here? So at any given point in time, you can calibrate it. If it was here, so having that population size data helps us calibrate it. And so they use that trend data and the calibration population size data to estimate what was present in 1970 versus what is present today. And that's how they estimated the decline or increase, if it will, of each species. But this study was remarkable because they didn't stop there. I mean, can you think of the size of this data set? That's huge, but they didn't stop there. They wanted to confirm that data was correct by using another independent data source. And so what they did is they looked at radar. And maybe you don't know that you can detect birds on radar, because when you watch your nightly news, right, they take all the birds out because they don't want you to get confused that it's a storm, right? But this is what the radar can look like. And so each of these circles on the screen is a radar point and birds that are taking off during migration. So there's this flash of birds as they take off and at night and as they land. And because birds and us are 70% water, just like the clouds, they are detected on radar. So they can look and estimate the density. They have really good data from Doppler radar for the past 20 years, and they can estimate density of the birds. And so this can't tell species, of course. This is just how many birds are out there. And they have seen a decline in 20%. So the breeding bird survey and the Christmas bird count data showed a decline in 25%. This data is showing a decline in 20%, decline since 1970. So that gives me a lot of confidence that this data is correct, because we have these two independent data sources that are saying the same thing. And this is a heat map just showing where most of our birds are migrating. And you can see that Wisconsin plays heavily in that migratory path. That it is, you are in a very important spot for doing conservation for migratory birds. What you do here really does matter to all of North America. So the question always is, okay, we have this decline. What is causing the decline? And we're going to go through another study that independently just looked at cause of decline in different birds. And the top cause of the decline of birds isn't surprising. It's habitat loss. Now, I think we try to think about habitat loss as, well, it happened during European settlement, right? 100 years ago. But habitat loss is still happening today. Our cities are expanding out into natural areas. We are not so much in Wisconsin, but throughout in Kansas, we're really bad at mowing all our ditches. And so we're reducing habitat there. Our cropland is expanding so that the ditches are disappearing entirely. We are still getting habitat loss, and we are still plowing virgin prairie. In Kansas, an acre, I don't know my numbers, but an acre in cropland is worth 5 or 6 times more if it's cropland than if it's native prairie grass. So people are plowing under to sell the land or to increase their income. It's just, we're losing prairie, we're losing grasslands, we're losing habitat all the time. So that's the biggest one. The next one is free roaming cats. So feral cats, free range cats, cats that come in at night but go out during the day, they kill lots of birds. And so, and the estimates are huge. In a slide or two, I'm going to show you an estimate of what we think or how many birds we think cats are killing each year. Collisions with glass is another one. So this is, during migration, they're flying around, they're attracted to cities with lights, and they fly into the glass. So that's a big problem. And this last one is a little bit hard because it's really, you don't usually see a dead bird in the middle of a cornfield, right? It's really hard to find dead birds and along a ditch that was sprayed or something like that, especially little songbirds. And so we believe that toxic pesticides, because the insects that are declining, climate change, but it's really hard to put a number on these. And so these are also things that are causing the decline, but it's really hard to put an exact number of how many birds we're losing each year to these. But this study from Loss et al. 2015 shows that cats is the biggest one. So, this study, we've lost 3 billion birds since 1970. Well, we're losing an estimated 2.6 billion birds each year to free-range cats. So if we got rid of all the cats on the landscape, we could get those back in 1 year. So that's why cats are such a big issue. And then the second one is windows. And we tend to think about, well, it's those skyscrapers that are the problem, right? Those skyscrapers where, dozens of birds get killed each day during migration. Well, there's a whole heck of a lot more houses out there than skyscrapers. And they hit the windows at about the same rate. So if you have a house where you've seen dead birds at your window, you should be part of the solution to help figure out what you can do to keep those birds from hitting your window. Vehicles is also a problem. It's a little bit hard to change that unless we lower speed limits, and you can imagine that's not very popular. Industrial collisions, this is mostly wind energy collisions. There's certain places, especially along the coast of California, where the birds funnel during migration through the wind turbines and cause those collisions. We don't have the data to really know about how like the wind turbines near Horicon or out in the middle of the place, how they affect migration, but there's probably some birds being killed by those industrial collisions. So the threats are many and they're really hard to take control of, but now we're going to start giving you some hope. Some things that are being done that you can do to help bird populations. And to say that I gave you depressing statistics about bird population declines, but there are some groups that are increasing, and woodpeckers are one of those groups. So there's 14 million more woodpeckers today than 1970. And if we think about that, you know, there has been a lot more reforestation. If we look at cover by woodlands in eastern North America especially, it's increased since 1970. On the flip side, woodlands are invading our prairies. And so that's why we're seeing decline in grassland birds, because they're becoming forests. So, but it is good for the woodpeckers. Waterfowl have also increased since 1970. And this example in particular gives me hope, because the reason for the waterfowl increases, it's hunting group, it's conservation groups that say, we are going to protect these ducks, and we're going to, you know, make sure that our prairie ponds have water, make sure there's grasslands and breeding areas, make sure there's, you know, wood duck boxes, and you know, and so this gives me hope, because if we put our minds and focus our minds on it, we can get an increase. And that is what organizations like Ducks Unlimited and other hunting organizations have done. We've also increased raptors. There's 15 million more raptors here since 1970. Well, if we think about what was happening in 1970, that was when we were still using DDT as a pesticide. And we know now that DDT causes eggshell thinning, so that when hawks incubate their eggs, they crack them instead of them being strong enough to survive till hatching. We figured that out. The United States has banned DDT, and we've seen an increase in our raptor populations. So again, this gives me hope, because we can band together, we can pass laws that ban these toxic substances, and we'll get an increase in our bird populations. And so what Audubon of Kansas is doing to help birds is we have a threefold mission. The first is advocacy, or advancing environmentally friendly legislation. So we are the voice for wildlife when decisions are being made. We work at the county and the state level, and it's really people like you who see a concern in your local area that call me and say, hey, I have a concern. What can we do about it? That really helps me do my job. And so I want to encourage you all today to be that voice for wildlife. What Audubon of Kansas is doing, we're working a lot on the county level, because in Kansas, solar and wind energy siting happens on the county level. So we're testifying, making sure counties know where their natural resources are in the county. We aren't banning solar and wind. We're just making sure that it's not put adjacent or on pristine habitat. We're also the voice for threatened species and endangered species, so the threatened lesser prairie chicken, the endangered whooping crane as it migrates through Kansas. We have two wonderful wetlands of international importance where these whooping cranes and 45% of the shorebird species in North America stop and refuel on their way. So we work to protect them. The second part of our mission is conservation. So we want to connect people with nature. And so we are acquiring properties through donation and then making that available. Some are available to the public, but some are just demonstration sites where we show how people and wildlife can coexist. So our largest property is a 5,000-acre ranch along the banks of the Niobrara River in northern Nebraska. It is a working cattle ranch, but it also supports mountain lion and elk and sharp-tailed grouse and greater prairie chicken. It's a wonderful site. Second property, and I'm proud to say that since I've started as executive director, all of our tours have seen whooping cranes. But of course, they're wild birds. That's not guaranteed. And if they're not there, there's thousands of sandhill cranes migrating at that time. And just hearing the flap of 1,000 sandhill cranes at once, it's really something that you'll never forget. Our second festival is the Prairie Chicken Festival called Lectrex. And this, again, we offer guided tours onto private land to see prairie chickens. We have 130 people from all over the country come to Hays, Kansas to see our prairie chickens. And we offer, like I said, opportunities to see both lesser and greater. That one, I warn you, registration fills quick. We only take about 130 people and about 70 people register the first day. So if you want to come out and see prairie chickens, make sure you get on our mailing list so you're one of the first to sign up. And then the last part of the environmental education mission is we're trying to get these backpacks into libraries throughout Kansas. This backpack contains adult and children's binoculars and fold-out field guides to birds, butterflies, and the moon, and a map of their county showing natural areas where they can go and look for birds. And so we got a grant to put it in southwest Kansas and in northeast Kansas, and now we're just trying to fill up the middle. Okay, so that's what Audubon of Kansas is doing, but what can you do? Well, like I said, cats are the biggest issue because and a lot of people don't understand that the cats that we have native to North America, we have the bobwhite and the lynx. Those two cats are mousers, right? They eat 90% mice. So our native birds are not used to a small cat being a predator. And so, you know, people used to put bells on collars. Well, bells are not native, you know, so birds don't recognize that a bell is a predator. But and I hate to mention this because there's only a few studies using this collar, but there is some evidence that if you put a brightly colored, like clown-looking collar on a cat, the birds have great vision. They can see color well, that they see that color coming and they do recognize that as, I don't know, I see it, I'm going to fly away. So there's some evidence for that. But again, the best thing to do with birds is to keep them inside. And there's study after study that say that cats live healthier, longer lives if they spend their time inside and they're not exposed to, fights and diseases and other things. Cars, get hit by a car, so they spend longer, happier lives inside. Okay, so I said, we tend to think about skyscrapers and go, oh boy, that skyscraper is bad. But if it's hitting your window at your house and you see a dead bird, you are part of the problem as well. So what can you do? What they're doing is seeing the reflection on the window and thinking that they can just fly through or something. So we have to somehow break up that reflection. Something to try is just putting soap on the outside to make it blurry, to break up that reflection. That's a cheap solution, but not permanent because it rains here once in a while, I hear. So that's one thing you can try. Using the hawk silhouettes, that doesn't seem to help. I've had a lot of people say that doesn't help. But there's a lot of things now that reflect in the UV, little dots that you can space out on your window. So try the UV reflecting things. There's some evidence those help. Some people just put a net or a sort of barrier in front of the window so that it breaks up the reflection. But there's a lot of resources online, different things you can try, and you might have to try 1 or 2 or 3 before you find something that works. But and generally you only have to do that during migration. So find something that works and do pay attention and do something. The next thing, in my introduction I said I'm devoted to planting native plants around my home. And native plants are so important because they feed things to birds that you don't get in birds. I mean, how many people feed sunflower seeds or bird seed to the birds in their backyard? Okay, a lot of hands. How many people feed insects, mealworms or something to the birds? Okay, we have a few, but a lot fewer. It's hard to feed insects to the birds, right? And it's expensive. What it's easier is to give them native plants, because native plants support native insects. And did you know 96% of land birds feed insects to their chicks? We always think, oh, well, hummingbirds eat nectar, and orioles eat berries, and cardinals eat seeds. All those birds are feeding insects to their chicks. So if you're not providing insects, you're not providing food for babies. But native plants do that. And so if we think about native plants, like this is an example. On the left-hand side is an oak tree. On the right-hand side is a ginkgo tree. Oaks are native to North America. Ginkgos are native to Asia. Oak trees provide 557 species of caterpillar food. So there's 557 insects or caterpillars on that oak tree, but there's only 5 species on the ginkgo. So which one do you think is going to provide more food? It's going to be our native plants. And if you think about it, when you bring a plant from Asia, you're not bringing all the insects with it, right? You're only bringing the plant. But the oak tree, it's native here. There's different insects. Like some only do the seed, and some do the twig, and some do the leaf, and some do the bark, and some do the roots. There's so many places for them to specialize. And so there's all these specializations on different parts of the plant. And that's why non-native plants are often advertised as pest-free, because none of our native insects can eat it. If you want to find out more, these are 2 great books. Bringing Nature Home and Nature's Best Hope by Doug Ptolemy provided these stats that I'm presenting to you today, and explains a lot more about why native plants are so important. And okay, so how many insects do we have to provide? This is a picture of a chickadee nest, and you all know what a chickadee is, right? Like the tiniest of birds that are found around here. And nestling chickadees eat 390 to 570 caterpillars per day. And they're in the nest for 12 to 14 days. That's over 9,000 caterpillars before they leave the nest. And they're still eating caterpillars after they leave the nest. So they need a lot of caterpillars, and so we provide native plants to do that. The other thing you can do is leave the leaves, making sure that you provide leaf litter, because these things, moth caterpillars, 94% of moth caterpillars pupate in leaf litter or the ground. So leave the leaves. It's funny, my husband Andrew, he's always like, do we have to have all these leaves? I'm like, yes, they're not doing it. They're just in the flower beds, And so I don't clean them out till in the middle of summer when I want to plant something else there, then I clean out the leaves. But you can just leave them there, and those moth caterpillars need that. You also try to reduce herbicides and pesticides. And so think about when you're using herbicides and pesticides, do you have to use it? So okay, there's something eating your food in your garden. don't just take the 7 dust and cover your whole garden. Think about, okay, it's only eating the leaf or the stem, and I just put it on that one particular area and then that one particular plant. So try and reduce. And so instead of spraying your whole yard for weeds, maybe you can just spot spray where you see the weed. So I'm not saying you can't use herbicides and pesticides ever. Just see if there's a way you can reduce it, and using it sparingly, maybe time of day. Just think about how you're using it and pay attention, make changes. And again, the thing that you can do the best is be an advocate for wildlife. You are out there watching the birds. You are the ones that have told me you've seen changes. You are the best voice for wildlife. So if you see something, speak up at your county commission, your city park, wherever there needs to be the voice for wildlife. If there's a concern, call your bird organizations. Maybe there's others that can help you and get involved. Just don't be quiet. And so I always say, share that information. You learned a lot of information tonight. Share that with others, get others involved, because all of you together can make a big difference. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. If you're on the Zoom, there is a link there if you want to sign up for our newsletters, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
I'm sure Jackie would be willing to take a few questions if anybody has anything that they want to follow up with.
Yes.
The name of those 2 books again that were up there?
Yeah, the 2 books were both by Doug Ptolemy, Bringing Nature Home and Nature's Best Hope. Ptolemy, Tallamy.
He's been in Wisconsin a couple of times. He spoke to a group up in the Western Great Lakes Bird and Mammals Laboratory about 10 years ago. And he was just becoming recognized. It's really good.
Yeah, Carl just said that he's spoken, for the people online, that he's spoken a couple times in Wisconsin, and I know he does a lot of speaking presentations, so keep your eyes and ears open. Hopefully he's coming to a neighborhood near you soon.
Are you aware of any initiatives or programs around the country which have been successful in getting people to keep their cats indoors? I talk to people on laws, and it's just like.
Yeah, so the question is, do I know of any successful things about keeping cats indoors? I think there's a lot of people that don't know. And so again, if you can be the voice, if you can, if you see a cat that's loose in your yard that has a collar, that's a cat that, you can, it has a home somewhere. So maybe that's a cat that you convince the owner to stay inside. And yeah, there's a lot of trap, neuter, release programs out there.
I had a pair of cats now, and I used to take them in there all the time, but they make you take them back home and release them back where you want them. But at least they're not breeding anymore, so.
Well, so study after study has shown that trap, neuter, release is not effective in lowering the cat population. And a lot of those, they also feed. And so you're creating unnatural concentrations of a non-native predator. And study after study shows that cats live longer, healthier lives indoors. So yeah, I am not supportive of trap, neuter, release. We don't have an official AOK position on this, so this is my personal opinion, that I am not supportive of that because it's not effective in reducing cat populations, and it's not healthy for the cats. Yes.
I was interested that house sparrows and starlings have fairly big declines.
Mm-hmm.
why, I mean, doesn't seem to be habitat. Is it farming practices? Pesticides?
So if we think about sparrows and starlings, they're mostly associated with urban areas. And the use in pesticides has skyrocketed in the past 20 or 30 years. And so I feel like part of that is our ubiquitous use of pesticides. Part of it is, you know, they're both cavity nesters. And so we are, I think we're doing better at cutting down. We're not leaving our snag trees. We're cutting them down right away.
I noticed it in the winter bird count. There's a lot, you know, and we're rural. Our bird count area is pretty rural. It's all farms. There used to be hundreds. You know, and a lot of the farms that anymore. You know,
Yeah.
Farming practices have changed to a degree that also, there isn't as much spilled grain, waste grain around. That's made a big difference. I guess doing some work on the breeding of that, and we're finding that out. So
Yeah, so just to repeat, so just a second. So repeating for the Zoom audience that we're talking about house sparrow and European starling decline, and we have lots of ideas about why they've declined, including changes in pesticides use and cavity development, and there's several in the audience saying how they've experienced those declines on surveys. Okay.
I was just going to say, some folks in this room may not be aware that the state of Wisconsin, that farmland preservation program encourages industrial farming, encourages large tract farming, and concentration of housing clusters. What's happening in my neighborhood is the large industrial farms are taking out fence rows.
Yeah.
Miles and miles of fence rows.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, huge habitat. Also, the pressure to feed their capital to take over concentrated animal feeding operations. They're mowing hay 3 and 4 times a year if they can. Mowing of the hay in the spring is a major devastation for habitat for grassland.
Yeah, so we're talking about habitat loss for grassland birds, and the speaker in the audience suggests, and a lot of evidence for it, that our farms are getting larger. And so because the size of our farms are increasing, they're getting rid of the hedgerows and the borders between different plots. And so those borders and edge areas were really important areas for habitat for birds. And then I forgot the second part. Was it
Mowing the hay.
mowing the hay? Oh, and the other part is that, yeah, grassland birds, like hay meadows are wonderful habitats for bobolink, but you have to let the hay grow up and there has to be sufficient residual hay from the previous year. But now haying more often and different timing of haying is not conducive to that.
I had a friend, a neighbor, who got a 5-acre field unmowed until middle of July or late July. And he every year had 5 or 6 nesting pairs of bobolinks.
Yeah, like I said, hay meadows are great for bobolinks. Our recommendations for Kansas, again, it might not be the same here, is to not mow until at least July 1st. You know, if you can wait till mid-July, that's great. And then make sure you stop mowing in time so that that grass can grow to at least 8 inches before so there's some residual cover for overwintering birds.
Do you think the woodpecker population is going up because of the emerald ash borer and that's sort of using?
So the emerald ash borer is, so the question is about, are the woodpecker populations going up because of the emerald ash borer? The emerald ash borer is an invasive species that is eating the ash trees, and they're killing them kind of east to west. And yes, the study occurred during the time when that was starting to move through, but it hadn't moved through all the way. And so I think that the emerald ash borer increases woodpecker populations locally for a span of maybe 10 years, based on my own personal experiences in Ohio. And it seemed like my timing in Ohio coincided with the introduction of emerald ash borer and then 10 years later. So seems like they have a local effect in the short term, maybe a decade in there, but we're seeing this trend throughout all of North America. And if you look at forest cover, it's increased tremendously. So even despite the one ash dying, we get an increase in overall forest cover of all species. So I think it's related more to the overall cover on a national level, but that definitely has an impact on the local level.
I have one more question.
Okay.
We have a park system near us, and I've begged them to not cut down all the fields and the meadows, but they continue to do it. You said there's organizations you can work with that might help that, because they're ignoring me pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. And so I always encourage, well, one-on-one, maybe you're not talking to the right person, keep asking questions, and one-on-one works a lot of the time. So never be afraid to call your county, say, hey, why are you mowing this ditch? Why are you mowing this city, don't be afraid to do that. If you do that and you are certain that you're talking to the right person, I often go in to these buildings and say, look at their title, like, am I talking to the right person? And express the concern. So try that first. If that doesn't help, I always say, let's get the community involved. So, it might have to contact more than one, bird organization or some other organization to get interest, but maybe you need to write an op-ed in the newspaper. Maybe you need to call your city commissioners, our wildlife, our wild things are worth it. So be a squeaky wheel until something happens. Yes. Do we have time?
One more question.
Okay.
Bill?
Have you had, I know I've heard programs about this, but have you had any experience or know people who've had experience using the dots on their windows at a residential level or at a small office building? And I kind of bring this up because we actually just received some free
Oh, good.
dot tape.
Mm-hmm.
If people want to know about it, they're little sticky dots. You kind of run this whole string across and then you press them on and then peel off the tape. So they're just dots.
I wondered how people got them.
One window to see, okay, is it going to make everybody crazy because it's the window where most things come?
Can I offer a local?
Sure.
Go ahead, Pete.
Well, I was going to say, so the question is about the dots on the window, the little UV dots, and I've been wondering how they get them so evenly spaced. It's a roll of tape that you spread out, press it on.
It's like crickets, so you just roll out the tape,
They're,
and it's got them every 2 inches.
yep.
You just have to keep your line straight, and then just press it on, and you peel the tape back off.
Yeah.
It just leaves the dots. That was the first concern we had.
Yeah, and so,
I asked the question, but we apparently got this through the Natural Resources Foundation.
nice.
Giveaway, so I don't know if that's still a possibility for folks who might be interested.
Okay, so possible source for those dots are the Natural Resource Foundation, and those do seem to, there is some scientific evidence that those are effective because the dots are placed 2 inches apart, so they're, the birds are gonna see them no matter where on the window they're flying towards, they're gonna see them, and they're reflecting UV, so they do create a little bit of a visual barrier for people. I find that, I don't know, personally, when I see those dots on the window, I just walk close to the window and look through the dots so I don't have to look through them. So I think they're a good solution. I'd love to, hear back in a year and see if you've got a reduced number of.
When, take advantage of your mic.
Yeah.
When the Lake Michigan, then the Western Great Lakes Bird and Bat Observatory, now the Lake Michigan Bird Observatory, was headquartered up at the old Caddy Shack at Forest Beach Migratory Preserve. We had windows there that were bird killers. And one of the first things we did was to install an earlier version of that bird tape on the windows. And we went from many, many birds killed to 0. And so it's proved that the recent director of the observatory, Dr. Vanderberg, put them on her house, had no no bird kills on any of her windows with the tape. It's available commercially if you can't find it for free through ABC, American Bird Conservancy, and they've done the research on that, and they're the ones promoting that.
So there you go. Proof.
Can I use your mic for two more things? First of all, to say thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Very much. And second, to say a more tangible thank you and honorarium from the Bird Club and our appreciation. I want to jump in on cats, organizations that can help with outdoor cats. The Bird City, Wisconsin. There are over 100 communities now in Wisconsin are members of Bird City. Bird City has appeared on their behalf at several communities that were thinking of encouraging trap, neuter, release or rescinding their cat leash laws, and we've been successful in that. We've also taken away from several communities their top-level Bird City recognition for enacting trap, neuter, release. So we're being proactive to try and encourage communities to do something about keeping cats indoors. And finally, here's a question for you. Why am I wearing this T-shirt tonight? Anybody got a memory that's 16 years old?
Looks like WSO convention with hawks on it.
Yeah, WSO, this is a Tom Utek design, Raptors galore, WSO convention 2008. Anybody know why? It was here. It was right in this room. This was right when this building opened. Corey didn't even know that. I didn't even know that. I think it was the first big event held when this building opened. Yeah. And Noel Cutright, the namesake for the Bird Club, organized that convention. It was 200 people in this room right here. And in the back room, you could drink some of his terrible fruit wine that he brought down from northern Wisconsin. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jackie, for being here with us. Glad to have you back. Watch your email. Make sure you go home with some of the magazines Jackie brought. And if you're not on the Bird Club email list, put your name on the sheet back there, and you'll hear about our next program too. Thanks again.